Now you're very welcome along. Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times, who's just coughed, by the way. That was
Sorry.
you. That was you. Hello, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Joe. Pleasure.
And Andy Dunne here in studio as well. Hello.
How are you, Joe?
We have a hell of a weekend to talk about. I mean, largely we're going to focus on Ireland, South Africa. Worth mentioning, there were some great games over the weekend. France 30, Australia 29 caught the eye. Australia coming to Dublin, obviously, in 2 weeks' time. England beaten by the same scoreline against Argentina. Michael Cheika having the most amazing week, really, any coach has ever had between the Lebanon and Argentina. New Zealand put 55 on Wales and Cardiff, which does catch the eye. And then Ireland's next opponents, Fiji, beaten by Scotland 28 points to 12. But of course, Ireland 19, South Africa 16 is our first port of call. Just as an occasion, Andy, Johnny Sexton talked about it afterwards. He said, well, that was a test match. And by that he meant attritional, intense. I mean, the injury toll even in the first half caught the eye. It was one of those matches where players go deep, I think.
Yeah, and the crowd went deep, and there was a furore at times around turnovers or penalties, and you could see that, you know, at one stage I think Porter coming off the back of a penalty, fist pumping to the crowd. So, you know, there was that level of buy-in, emotional buy-in from both teams, supporters. Always adds, I suppose, to that overall intensity of that test match experience Sexton is talking about, and nice to see it in November at a time when sometimes other sports fans question the validity of it. Is it a competition? Is it not? I mean, it's without doubt a competition and a competitive fixture, yeah.
Well, look at Tyke Burns' face as he walked off. It was like he'd gone 15 rounds. I even at 6-6, that first half, it was absorbing.
Yeah, I met a few people afterwards that said, oh, that first half was boring. For me, it was anything but. I mean, I suppose for those who want their tries and, you know, lots of running rugby, they'll get that next Saturday, ironically, 1 p.m. against Fiji. But I thought that first half was riveting because it was like a game of roulette in the way that Ireland were trying to take on the South African blitz defence and took a few hits in doing so and failing on about 3 occasions when they did engineer space on the outside through inaccuracy of the passer or the receiver. And if you'd said beforehand that the Boks were going to have 5 penalties to the inside the Leinster, or inside the Irish 22, and go for them all 5 would be held up, or the fifth one effectively stolen, and Ireland would have 1 attempt at it in the second half and they would score from it, nobody would have believed you. That was, I think, it wasn't the most beautiful rugby, but when the Boks throw their A game at you and you withstand it, it must have given them great confidence. Even then, at half time, as you're right, you would have said, having lost Stuart McCluskey, Conor Murray, and then Tyke Furlong at the interval, with Finlay Bealham to come on for the second half to face up to Stephen Kitchoff and Ox Neche. I don't know why they tried to scrum so illegally, why they just didn't scrum straight. They didn't. They were like they're going around a bend. And so that was great that they came through it in that way as well. But digging deep into the reserves, Jimmy O'Brien, I think, hasn't played at outside centre for Leinster since something like March last year. It was against Zebra Parma. Like, for him to slot in, Gary Ringwald, who was magnificent again, as usual, just in his own understated way. And for them to then be rewarded for their brand of rugby and keep going for it. So it was a very brave performance in many ways. And I think what I really loved about it, Joe, is that I remember both head coaches last week being asked, will you be keeping your powder dry for the World Cup in 11 months' time or less than a year's time? And neither team kept their powder dry. They both went out of both barrels and played their games, and Ireland came out on top.
Even that first 15 minutes, Jay referenced there, where South Africa are just hammering away inside the Irish 22. I think Ireland made about 50 tackles in the first 15 minutes. Now, one of those things was unsustainable. South Africa were going to run out of steam, or Ireland were going to run out of steam. And Ireland found their way a little bit into the game. And as Gerry mentioned, and curious for your thoughts on that game within the game, which was that South African blitz defence shooting up and Ireland desperately trying to, under crazy pressure, get out to the fringes. Even on the Virgin commentary, CJ Stander was saying this is going to work eventually. What Ireland are doing here is going to work. But man, that South African defence is quite something.
Yeah, it's fearsome in the speed with which they're just in your face. But I think, you know, I thought McCluskey he's a brilliant option because he's obviously going to attract them physically. But if we could get the ball in his hands more, or if Henshaw's playing there, the second receiver is the key person in attack against the blitz defence. It's not Sexton or whoever plays at 10, because they trade off the idea 10 is going to throw a wide ball and that's airtime, and as long as there's airtime on the ball, they're coming up and they're probably making a gamble it's going to be into that third channel. If you just put an element of doubt in their mind, you make a short bullet pass to to 12. That guy then becomes a dog leg in their defence, and he's very vulnerable, and you can then go over him. And we could see that happening a couple of times, but it was Sexton inevitably was throwing that wider ball over the top. I think if the guy one out from Sexton is throwing that ball over the top, the pass lands more often. You get more space, more, I suppose, connection, in terms of the distance of the pass. So a few of them just landed about an inch too short, or Sexton was under too much pressure. But the idea was exactly right, is to try and float it over that rush defender. But I just think one out, doing that attack more from the McCluskey channel, for example, or the Henshaw channel, is the ideal way to then beat that defence. But I mean, you mentioned that first 15-20 minutes. We spent so long really defending as opposed to attacking really in that period. But one of the things to look at, obviously the defensive maul I thought was outstanding, really, really outstanding. But we just had an easy cough up from a restart. And against a team like South Africa, if you cough up a restart and give them possession in your own half, again, you're making 30 to 40 needless tackles, and you're getting it's pretty punishing, So I would imagine they'll sit back and look at that and say, lads, just get that restart right. We've 30 less tackles to make. So
10 incredible minutes after half time. 2 tries.
Yeah. Okay, they got a little bit lucky with the Johnny Sexton inside pass to Mac Hansen. That was forward, and the South Africans complained in the media about that bitterly, but we'll never mention Judson Kobe's yellow card that could easily have been red. But after that, the sequence of play with Johnny Sexton down from the hit he then takes from Jesse Creel, Mac Hansen goes into first receiver, Gary Ringrose goes twice into first receiver. They just kept, and that's when they're at their best then, and there was a lovely little disguise pass from Gibson-Park to Hansen to go through the hole. And Ringrose is just playing outstanding rugby. He started at 13, moved to 12, and then he's effectively playing 10. He makes the final carry with his footwork that gets them over the gain line, that gets Springboks offside. And probably the pivotal moment of the match. It's 6-all, it's an arm wrestle, and Johnny Sexton says we're going to the corner.
Oh, it's a take your points game on the face of it.
And what a brilliant decision it was. And do you know what it did as well, Joe? It really got the crowd into the game in a major way. There was a huge roar of approval at this call, right? Let's go for it. And then they execute the try. Fair play to Josh van der Fleer. You see Simon Easterby giving Paul O'Connell a pat in the back. I wonder, did they mean to go blind as much as South Africa were trying to drag them over touch and goal? And then the second try is just what this team is all about. Heads up rugby. Like Hugo Keenan, great take, first game back, solid as a rock. They go up to the box kick, there's a loose ball from a ruck. Caelan Doris, to keep that ball in play, was as skillful a moment as there was in the match. To know that Josh van der Fleer was there. Again, Balakoon and Ringrose hit the ruck. And then you've got, it was James Ryan a lock at Swarm half. You've got the 2 props next receiving the ball, moving on to Jameson Gibson-Park. And this is how you beat a blitz defence as well. If you show go and they shoot up. Richie Mwanga does it brilliantly against him. He actually does it better than Bowden Barrett. But that's what Gibson-Park did. That is the moment. That's the moment of skill, probably off the match. And then just really clever, excellent execution. Another lock involved, Tyg Byrne. And then it was Hugo Keenan, and then to Jimmy O'Brien, perfect pass for Mac Hansen finish. Like, it was just a class try. Yeah. And it felt, the only nagging thing about it was, because Johnny didn't land either of the touchline conversions, that what it could have been a 20 points to 6 lead was only 16-6, and there was still plenty of time left in the clock. But that effectively was where they won the match.
Yeah.
There was work to do. Even after the line break from Gibson-Park, there's something I love watching Hugo Keenan, the free running style. He doesn't run like he's playing in an international rugby match. Most people run hunched or braced for impact. He kind of runs like an 800 metre athlete who's out on a track with no fear of being hit, and there's an amazing freedom to watching how he runs. Just an observation on that. But he obviously came into the line and gave it to O'Brien. But O'Brien if you see that overhead angle, O'Brien straightens it up, because there's a lot of cover defence coming across, and it's a very subtle skill and can be glossed over. But he really checked that cover defence coming across. And it's a skill that gets overlooked. I just
made it look easy when it wasn't easy.
He did. I mean, there's a lot of rush defence coming. There's a lot of pressure on your inside. The tendency is you're naturally going to drift with that. But to check that, go against it, face that kind of onslaught coming across, and then time the pass. It was really nice, little understated skill.
So the reason that sounds so encouraging is we have these players playing off script, reacting to situations with great intelligence.
Well, I got mixed up. Obviously, I didn't realise it was a Caelan Doris who went and picked it up and passed it back inside.
Yeah,
I thought that was
getting tackled into
I had my roles mixed up. I thought it was James Ryan, but
Ryan comes in as
yes, yeah. But just I mean, again, as Gerry alluded to, different ways to beat their rush defence. Gibson-Park just held possession and delayed, as he referenced Mo'unga does so well. Rush defences like that can be broken when you have this. It's a very, very fine line between hesitancy and delaying it, and then delaying it too much. You delay it too much, you're in massive trouble. If you delay it enough, they'll often make the decision for you, and there'll be a gap either side of the runner that shoots. So it just takes an incredible amount of composure on the ball, and certainly Gibson-Park has that.
Just the two defenders completely out of the game.
Yeah, he just allows them make that decision, but again, takes huge confidence and composure.
And then there was probably a degree of the hanging on part a little bit towards the end, where again it was about resolve. And what was very interesting, Gerry, is that Johnny Sexton said afterwards, we were reviewing the Sunday papers yesterday, it was on the front page of the Sunday Independent, he was making the observation that maybe under that kind of pressure and that physicality, previous Irish teams, he didn't pinpoint what years he's talking about, but he said they might have folded under that kind of pressure. So he was almost talking about a kind of psychological resolve maybe that hasn't been there previously. That jumped off the page to me. Again, he didn't name names or name teams, but it was pretty. There were a few teammates going, "Oh, interesting." You know?
It was he's very honest in his immediate post-match assessments, isn't he? Sometimes maybe too honest for his own good. He always is. Like, remember after the Champions Cup final, should I have gone for more 3-pointers? Nobody'd asked him, but he just thinking out loud.
He set the narrative. In change. So
I think that's a valid point.
Does it jump out to you though?
Yeah, definitely. And I tell you what else, Joe. I mean, I hate viewing all these November tests and all the Six Nations games now purely in the prism of a World Cup. But had the Springboks won that game, even by then coming back and winning and taking from Ireland, the narrative would have been, just like England away if it won at full strength, or France and Paris, Ireland, and now the Boks, and a bit like La Rochelle and Saracens against Leinster.
Yeah.
Ireland can't take the big physical bullying from these teams. So that kind of dispels that narrative. And what's more, I think that narrative could have seeped into the players' minds if they had lost. By winning that, I don't think it gives them a great psychological edge when Ireland plays South Africa in Stade de France, but I think it denies South Africa one.
The edge. Because where are you on the size question now? Because a part of me absolutely, totally agrees with Gerry's point there. It would have been very damaging to lose this African size. But at the same time, home advantage when you're going up against that size feels significant as opposed to neutral venue. They have a number 10 who really just proved beyond all doubt as great as his feet are. He can't kick. And, they were, I know Sexton missed some kicks, but they were costly kicks for South Africa to miss. We've maybe parked the size worry as opposed to completely put it to bed.
The size, I personally, one of my biggest worries was parked back in Paris, back in was it February or March. We didn't get blown away in the set piece or in the maul in France. We got, I suppose we lost physical battles because they made line breaks. There, and my sense watching that Ireland-France game back in February was the likes of Damien Penaud and the left winger. His name escapes me.
Do we not have the likes of Antonio and these guys running over Ireland and then they went wide?
No, it was the other way around.
Really?
Honestly, the first 15 minutes of that game, we had a chat about it on here.
I remember, and you convinced me at the time.
I convinced you at the time, and now you've gone back to the original narrative. But I'm wholly convinced that France made line breaks out wide against us in that game, and then when they're behind us, they gave it to the likes of Antonio, who's running onto the ball from 20 metres against a broken defence. That's not losing a physical battle against a 150 kilogram man. You're not going to win that no matter who you are. What happened against France was we held our own in the scrum and we had a very good defensive maul, and that slightly got glossed over because we lost. Against South Africa, we had a very good scrum again. By and large, there had been a few worries there, and we certainly creaked in the second half. I think Porter got away with one as well on a penalty decision that was the same sequence with Sexton's forward pass. So we had a bit of luck, but our line-out defence was strong. Our defence overall was strong. Our scrum held true. So I think we did really well in terms of matching that physical South African dominance. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think there's an element of we can park it with hope going forward. I think there's other issues that I'd be concerned about. Is that South African side, every bit of them is built for a kicking dominant 10. That's what that team needs. And this guy, Willemse, was... he's a footwork player, he's a baller, but he ain't the guy they need in the way they play. And even Willie LaRue coming in, the
difference he made.
Yeah, and he's a part timer in that position, but he made a massive difference to how they play. But
so in that respect, and I think did they throw everything at each other? Yes, they did.
Yeah,
but with the view to the World Cup, there was also a degree of let's see how Willemse goes at 10, and they've learned that now. So they are still refining and fine-tuning.
Yeah, I think physical parity, when that happens, if you've got a good, reliable kicking 10, that kind of add a whole different aspect. And I think that's what they've had when they've been successful with Mornay Stein, with Andre Pollard.
So do you think if Pollard's in that team at 10, they win the game?
Yeah.
You do?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And that's crucial.
I wouldn't necessarily agree.
Okay.
I would think that if they had Pollard and Lucanio Am at outside centre, then it's a different game, because Lucanio Am is really their creative force. He's their most creative back player before you get to the speedsters on the edges. Jesse Keel, great defender, and defended superbly, and defends that outside channel, leads that blitz defence as well as anybody. But he doesn't have the range of skills of a Lucanio Am, as a very underrated player, even though he's won a World Cup winner.
Yeah. So expand though on why with Pollard they win.
Well, they kicked their points.
Simple as that.
Yeah, and I'd imagine they play a bit more territory, and just a bit more, I suppose, contained. They've slightly fallen between two stools there, with a monstrous pack who can take on a team physically, but then they don't play a kick and territory game with a kind of dancing, fleet-footed 10 who's not controlling anything. So I would imagine it's a classic case of the forward pack getting up after a fair bit of work and seeing that they're not 30 yards further down the field and not too happy about it.
Yeah.
They have a very definitive style that is successful, and they make no apologies about it, and I don't think they should go away from it going into the World Cup, but they definitely need that type of old-fashioned, traditional kicking dominant 10 for them to be at their best.
He's not a great playmaker though, Pollard, is he?
No, he's not.
And when you see Willie LaRue come in at that half, what was the difference? They actually had some skills in the outside channels.
Well, they could. I mean,
the Etzebeth pop for the last try was sensational. He was probably their best player. It was outstanding.
I think for their game to evolve, they could get a different 10, but I don't know if they're going to do that. Yeah.
They got away with plan A to win the last World Cup, but you're not going to win every World Cup with just plan A.
No, hopefully they don't.
It's a good plan, but hopefully they don't.
Exactly.
We're going to take a very short break. Gerry Thornley and Andy Dunne are staying with us. Rugby and Off the Ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Back in 1 sec.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now, you're very welcome back to Monday Night Rugby. By the way, competition, Autumn Nation Series continues. Fiji in town on Saturday. We have a pair of tickets to the game. We will throw in 2 Ireland jerseys as well, all with thanks to our rugby partner Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. To get your name in the draw, all you have to do is identify our mystery voice. Asked if Ireland are now favourites for the World Cup.
The World Cup in 12 months' time or 11 months' time. Yeah, people will, I suppose, postulate about who's where and who's favourite, and it's a nebulous thing for us.
To enter, just it's like every time you start a section, you cough.
You told me I could. I asked you could I.
I didn't know it would go on for so long.
It's a short cough.
If you know who that mystery voice is, text your answer along with your name, please. 53106 hashtag Team of Us. Gerry Thornley is still here. Andy Dunne still here. On World Cup.
Can I cough?
Yes, but listen, by all means, whether I say yes or no, it makes no odds anyway. So on World Cup favouritism, I would say there was a distinct we park this and move on quality to the Irish management and player reaction. I think a sincere one, as in we've climbed this mountain before and been world number one. Well, we know it's great and everything, but it's been done. And two, they're just so badly burned by 19.
True. And again, that might have fueled the narrative that, this one that you immediately asked straight afterwards on television, have we peaked too soon for the World Cup? And that would have gathered momentum too, wouldn't it? The naysayers are just waiting for this team to slip up so they can start saying this. It's going to be said. So that's part of that theory as well.
Can we park that theory? I know
for the moment, yes.
I know they're not getting carried away, but I think it's a legitimate talking point that would Ireland not want this World Cup right now as opposed to in a year?
No, because they think they're going to get better.
I agree.
You agree?
Fully.
I
just think we're actually playing at such a high competitive level, but we're also playing within ourselves. I think we've got variation in our attack. I think we're building strength and depth across various positions. I think there's the psychological impact of 20 years, cyclical. This such story of getting it slightly wrong. Half the management have been through that as players, and they're just so tuned in to the timing of this process. I actually feel we're just going to keep slowly, gradually improving, building strength and depth. Friday night's game's another example where you've got another host of guys who are just young lads who are just kind of a little bit back from real likely starting places, but again, not a million miles. So I just really like how he's managing the whole thing, and where we peaked previously was, I don't know, and I was on record and we chatted on air about it. In that Schmidt era, I'm not sure was there anywhere to go with our game. We were at peak level of execution with our game when we were peaking. We were playing a very definitive style that was labour intensive, and the whole thing was, Jesus, can we keep this going? Like, it's not an overly labour intensive game in attack that we're playing. It's a very skillful game.
And also, like I said earlier, there was those three or four chances when they didn't get to the edges. Like, as Johnny Sexton said afterwards, they didn't play well. That was another revealing comment that he made.
Yeah.
They can play a lot better than that. They actually found a way, another completely different way to win a match against a top-tier nation that they probably haven't done in this long run of 15 wins and 17 games or whatever it is. So I think they can play better, and I agree totally with Andy that they can improve their depth in certain positions. They've still got to find out about more players. Next weekend against Fiji is going to be very revealing, the selection. Even looking at the squad today, it looks like both Caelan Blade and Jack Crowley have gone above three other internationals in their positions who are back at home with their provinces. And be interested to see if they've got an involvement, because they do. Who is the alternative at fullback to Hugo Keenan? There's a few issues still to resolve, and they've got some time, but not a huge amount of time. Maybe the Italy game, the Six Nations, maybe Fiji, to a degree Australia, to find out these questions. So I think, and the other thing I think as well, which is key, I don't think that Irish team under Joe Schmidt was as adaptable as this team. I think last Saturday shows that they're more adaptable. They can find different ways of winning, and they're also less predictable, because they're less prescriptive, therefore they're less predictable, so they can't be analysed as easily by the opposition. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, even the I think the initial attack, the very first attack, set it up midfield off a line out, and Murray, who I've criticised for the box kicking before, but that was a really brave chip kick. It was a chip kick deep in the opposition territory, but you can clearly see on replay there's 12 guys lined up ready to roll. They know what's happening, and Ringrose wins it back. That immediately puts a rushed defence, South African, on the back heels. South African defence, next time we get it in midfield, they're like, can we rush? Maybe they're going to chip over. Just smart little things like that set the tone. That's very unpredictable. Nobody would have said we're going to do that in the first 2 minutes, and it's nice to see.
The first play of the match. It was their open gambit.
Absolutely.
Very clever. And I can imagine a lot of people at home going, oh, here we go again, feast of box kicking, but actually...
No, it was a really smart play. Well executed, yeah.
And it led to 3 points.
Yeah.
Would you like Joey Carberry to have got more minutes?
They didn't show a huge amount of faith, but then again, Johnny Sexton's not only the number 10 and the captain. He's Johnny Sexton. Like,
Listen,
he's the most important player in the team.
He's in the habit of playing 80 minutes at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a good thing for him, but I wouldn't like to see him get a whole lot more time now, in terms of certainly doesn't need to be involved against Fiji.
No.
And I would wager he doesn't need to be involved against on Australia, because we already know what he can do. Unless there's, time in his legs, they need him to build up time, because, how do you prepare for Six Nations where there's 5 in a row, or World Cup where there's 5 in a row? You can't prepare for that by being rested all the time. So they've got this very, I suppose, balancing act they've got to play, and it's tricky with Johnny. I would like to see maybe Carberry get a full 80 in one of the games, and one of Frawley or Crowley maybe getting a bit of shared time in one of the other games.
Well, because Frawley's dropped out, Jack Crowley's next in. So I would like to see Joey start next week against Fiji, and maybe move to full back for the last 20 or 30 minutes like he did against Argentina last November when he was man of the match. It's another great little extra ploy to have. An out half can play full back and very effectively. Just a nice little weapon to have, like the way the All Blacks use Bowden Barrett or whatever else. And Willie LaRue. Yeah. So it's a good thing to have. Not every country has it.
Yeah.
And then let Jack Crowley make his debut for the last 20 or 30 minutes.
And is Frawley injured?
Yeah, he's got a twisted knee from the A game.
Okay.
So Crowley effectively has been called in, and effectively so is Caelan Blade due to Conor Murray dropping out.
Starting to have a bolder feel, isn't he? 12 months out. The other thing to mention, because I guess in that holy trinity of Porter and Furlong and Sexton, please don't get injured. Furlong did get injured, and Finlay Bealham came in and more than held up his end of the bargain.
He's actually having a good season with Connacht. I think I mentioned this show before. He's closed out 4 wins against the All Blacks, including Chicago. I think it's time to cut him a little bit of slack. I think there is a theory, because Tadhg Furlong has been so brilliant.
Yes.
That's obviously one thing. I think maybe it's something to do with his look. He's just a bit of a joker as well, and he's an interesting character, but he's a bit of a joker in Connacht, very much so. Keeps the spirit in the dressing room alive. But he played once against, I can't remember who he played him. They played him at Loosehead, and it went very badly for him. But he's not a Loosehead, he's a tight head. And he's now about 31, so he's actually coming into the peak years of his career, really, for a prop. And he's been playing very well for Connacht this season. He had a fantastic day in the scrums against David Kilcoyne. Connacht did a number in the Munster scrum, and he's got good skill sets.
Yeah, as we saw. And
he does have.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to see him start now, because I can't remember when he last started a game, because a lot of these players who are on the bench, Kieran Treadwell, you'd like to see him start a match.
You're talking about Dewey Park, debates about being physically overwhelmed by the likes of South Africa, but you start a game with Tadhg Byrne in the second row, that could easily be levelled at your front five. It's slightly too lightweight, but if we show parity, which we certainly did in terms of the scrum, the driven maul, and you've got Tadhg Byrne there, who's in terms of what he can do around the field is immense. That adds a whole aspect to how competitive you are. When we stopped their driven maul, which we did through matching them with physical strength, we then became disruptive to the same maul. We didn't just hold off, we stopped all their momentum, and eventually we started breaking through it, and it caused huge headaches for South Africa. And you could just see those little, again, these are the nuanced little details that having a guy like Byrne there, if we hold our own in terms of the weight discrepancy, but we match it for strength and technique in terms of the maul, and then we get Tadhg Byrne breaking through it and causing havoc, and other guys, Van der Fleer, coming through. There's a distinctive approach there. Yeah, there is.
I have never heard you as enthusiastic about what Ireland are doing.
Yeah, I haven't been. Yeah. I haven't been as enthusiastic, and I think that change happened when we beat England in an empty Lansdowne Road. The initial 4 or 5 games when Farrell was in charge, they were very much finding their way, and they weren't, particularly, they certainly weren't playing anywhere near the level they're at now.
But they never could play in a game like that, could they? You know what I mean? You couldn't just turn on a game like that like a tap in the first game.
And a new coach and everything like that. But certainly his initial games, there was a lot of trial and error going on. And
Mike Catt was under big scrutiny.
Huge. He's not getting enough credit now. Right across the board, there seems to be a smartness, there seems to be a resourcefulness, there's ingenuity, there's strength and depth, there's variation in attack, there's, even we stopped their defensive maul so many occasions, but then later on we threw a guy up. I think it was a Treadwell or James Ryan at the front, and he just robs them 5 yards out from our line.
The last one before half time.
Last one before half time. They're thinking, right, we're going to get them this time. But then we just countered them again, and it was just so smart. There was no driven maul. We stole it on them.
They're clearly a very empowered team, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the coaches empower them. Look, this is how I'm happy, but you've got to decide on the pitch, not us.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at that on, often a big criticism, it's like the players aren't using their head in the actual moment. They've a box of tools, but they're not picking the right tool. This team seems to pick the right tool, which suggests their game management is smart, their theory is smart, and that only comes from experience and then coaches who say, I'm not going to decide every facet of play for you guys, you're going to have to work it out as you see it. But throwing James Ryan up 2 minutes before half time, having stopped 3 or 4 defensive mauls, it's another little moment where you just went, that's a sharp team.
Yes. Thinking on their feet.
Absolutely.
It's very encouraging. Are you hearing much about Gary Keegan? It's just he's got such a track record. And they made a big point in 2019 of talking about the mentality and the psychology of the team, and we mentioned Johnny Sexton's comments after the game at the weekend.
He's a big factor. He's a big factor, and both individually and collectively with the players. It's arguably as big a transformation as there's been in any other aspect of this Irish team, is the psychology of the team, the total next moment focused. Like, for Keith Earls, Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray all to basically come out and say, this is the best squad I've ever been involved in, having effectively been relegated to the bench or worse, just tells you how the buy-in.
Yeah, they're a happy bunch.
Yeah, it's just a huge buy-in to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that includes not swinging from the rafters when you win a match. That includes saying, yes, right, what can we do better? What can we do better?
Rassie Erasmus took to Twitter. I'm presuming his account wasn't hacked. So he's taking responsibility for this thing going public. He is, I would say he's just launching the Twitter mob on the referee, Nika Amashukeli. And what he's shown is the 2 clips of ball being kicked in ruck in both instances. One time it was allowed in Ireland's favour, the other time not allowed in South Africa's, against South Africa. And look, it was a mistake. Referees make mistake. I dare say if you were to assess Rassie's performance across the week and all the players across the 80 minutes, they also made some mistakes. These things happen. Apparently that's not allowed with Rassie, and so he has to take to Twitter and really try and publicly put this referee under massive pressure. And he would have heard the pressure that Nick Berry felt last year, and still he does it. I hear he's a very charismatic person and people are very fond of him in Munster. I have to say, I look from afar and I just really don't like much about his behaviour.
No, neither do I. I think it's pathetic. I think it's coincidentally it came in the media aftermath of Springboks defeats, both the video rant and now this one. So basically, Springboks shouldn't be losing. There's a sense of entitlement. They're world champions. They should be able to beat the Lions. They should be able to beat Ireland. It's so one-eyed. But of course, back in South Africa, he's the king. So everybody goes along with this, and it's very polarising. It's damaging for the game. Like I said, it's pathetic. You could easily. He never picks out decisions that went unfairly in his favour or in his team's favour. Like, you freeze frame that last penalty before half time that Matthew Raynell calls from the side of the pitch for offside, and it looks a perfectly formed line of Irish defenders behind the hindmost foot as the scrum half is passing the ball away, and then comes up together. There's no one player even slightly in front of the rest, and no number is called. I thought it was an unfathomable decision. So you're always going to get a few decisions in review that don't go either way. We know rugby's a far from perfect game. That's certainly its laws and its refereeing, its match officiation are far from perfect. And they obviously got away with the biggest decision, the biggest call of the day, in Cheslin Colby not getting red carded. Many an official might well have given Cheslin Colby. I sometimes do think that had that been somebody else with a worse disciplinary record, they would have got a red card.
Less of a superstar status.
Yeah.
Erasmus knows what he's doing. This puts pressure on this referee the next time he referees a South African game, and it puts pressure on any referee refereeing a South African game, because there for the grace of God go I, and I know what I'm going to get in the aftermath now from Rassie. He needs to be sanctioned for this.
Yeah,
this
is what I'm surprised by. Was he not heavily sanctioned?
His first game back after a 2-month match day ban.
Yeah,
that was his first game back.
His response. Yeah. I mean, he's treading a very thin line and turning international referees against his team. Like, I don't know how clever it is.
That's a good point.
Like, how many international referees are going to be...
for him in the lines.
It definitely worked.
It worked for him in the lines.
They were paralysed in the second test. Remember, it took an hour. and the high hits were suddenly not going to be sanctioned
The referees are an egotistical bunch that stick together, and they, a lot of them now are ship-shape, trim, look the part, think their way through these games, analyse everything to the hilt. There's no way there's a group of... And they get together, these referees, and they sit down in very, very serious way, in a very organised way, and they will discuss this. And I can't fathom that 15, 20 of these guys are going to sit down and say, we're going to get walked on by Rassie Erasmus again. So, I'm not sure if it's going to go in his favour. So you got a lot of fellas coming into referee and going, I'll take this one. I guarantee you're going to have a couple of refs putting their hand up and say, I want this game. I would like to take this game, and they're not going to bully me. So, that's not a good outcome for you if that's your team. And referees are almost going in against you to start or to prove a point.
I can think of one or two past referees that fall into that category. One of whom is named Lewis, and the other's named Rolland.
Absolutely. I mean, the nature of referees. Maybe I'm slightly stereotyping here, but there's a lot of referees who rate themselves.
I understand that. Last summer, it majorly worked for him.
Yes.
Majorly.
I just don't see it happening again.
Okay. Ireland Day, New Zealand, we should mention at the RDS with the view to Thursday in Porky Queeve as well, which has been a sellout for a week. Very excited to get some international rugby down there. Damien McKenzie was joy to watch on Friday night.
Pure joy.
Yeah.
I went along not working, which is a lovely thing to do.
Okay.
Sat in the press box and watched it.
Yeah.
And you just couldn't take your eyes off McKenzie. He was so far and away the best player of the pitch.
Yeah.
His ability to strike the ball. That pass after the intercept off the line, they get a slight deflection in the throw and he runs up and catches on the full.
Yeah.
And he gets second involvement and he throws out a brilliant left to right pass. Oh, he was class. I felt sorry for that Ireland team because I think they got the short straw of all short straws.
Go on.
Well, I don't think they were excessively well coached because there wouldn't have been time to excessively well coach them. I can imagine they held a lot of bibs for the 8. I could be wrong, but there was a line out. They were 14-0 down, and they get their first entry into the All Blacks 22, and they have a line out, and it goes well, and the ball's down to Casey off the top into James Hume, who's playing slightly out of position at 12 and got a fearful buffeting, and he carries it up the middle with Jamie Osborne beside him. Casey comes around, the ball's presented, and Casey's there, and there's not one of the pack is at the ruck. Not one. For the second phase.
Yeah.
That's pretty basic. And in defence, they have Casey on the wing for a cross kick.
So lambs to the slaughter.
I thought a little bit.
Could you not counter-argue there's an element of foresight there? The management know they're exposed. They know they're going in and they're under-coached. But they're going to learn rapidly as a result of the experience, chastening experience as it is for them, that they're then exposed to this environment again, and it's, how do you get closer, how do you get better? You learn a lot quicker as a player having gone in and got your arse handed to you by New Zealand, for 45 minutes or 60 minutes.
After 15 minutes I was thinking something that a retired colleague I met at the match on Saturday thought the exact same thing after about 15 minutes. This was like watching a match from the 90s.
Okay.
It really was, because they were just winning so many collisions. I can't remember an Irish ball carrier winning a collision all night. It was very hard.
There was a moment where Coombs took it off line out and ran straight into a wall and got smashed backwards.
That was the team of the night.
It really was, yeah. And they looked as well like a New Zealand side that had actually not taken the series defeat in the summer all that well. I mean, maybe we'd underestimated, the kind of...
Or in the likes of McKenzie not being left out of the senior squad too well.
Yeah, sure.
Perenara wants back into that squad, and they had a separate coaching ticket that had been coaching prepared for this game for 1 week.
It looked it. What are we expecting then on Thursday, Porky Queeve? There are 14 Springboks capped, named in the side. Ireland will name their team on... Munster will name their team on Wednesday. I guess this brings back memories of the Haka in 08, all those years ago now. How do we pitch this? What are we to say about this?
Well, it's a great occasion for the Munster brand.
Yeah.
It promotes the Munster brand again. It shows the Munster brand of South Africa. It's a fabulous brand, Munster, still. I sometimes think they should sell it more in the way they make players available for interviews and so forth. They're not the best in the world at that. But it is still a fabulous brand. And there will be a great sense of occasion.
They're really up against it, are they?
I'd be slightly fearful for them.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of injuries. I'm told they took last week off. They needed it after the bruising start they've had to the season. So it's going to be a very tough game for them. But then we all thought that in 08, everybody thought that Munster team was going to get absolutely annihilated. It was the only non-competitive fixture stroke of the season, and was by some distance the best match of the season.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Now, 08 Munster versus 2022 Munster is slightly different beast. That would be the concern. What would you...
Well, that 08 team had Peter Stringer and Mick O'Driscoll. These players weren't making the senior up. They had a lot of good players.
It might stir up this deep-rooted thing in their history from 78, you know. Young players who grew up on that legacy, you know, going out and get a chance to play against the Springboks in a packed stadium. You're going to get 30% already higher than you would expect on a normal match day.
Yeah.
You know?
We should just finish by noting the passing, as you did in the paper today, of Paul McNaughton. An extraordinary sporting life. I was reading your piece and some of the sentences in it jump out. So, Leinster Hall of Fame, Irish International, Rugby, Soccer, GAA, played for Shelbourne, Bray Wanderers, the Wicklow Senior Footballers. There is a line where you say he played all 3 sports at Lansdowne Road, Dalymount and Croke Park in the same season, in the same month. And then went on to have this career as Irish team manager with Declan Kidney and EPCR board member and chairman, and wow, amazing.
Hugely influential figure throughout, not just his playing career, but particularly after his playing career, because he was a sharply intelligent man. I was lucky enough to get to know him. He was very helpful for me when the Irish Times did a book on the 09 Grand Slam. Even though the RFU were doing an official one, he still made people available to me so we could get our book done. He was a very strong man, very intelligent, didn't take much in the way of BS, and when he wanted to get something done, he got it done. And he was key in Leinster recruiting the likes of Rocky Elsom, he used to say with CJ van der Linder, just give Michael Checker the squad to go and win that 2008-2009 Heineken Cup. Key figure. And then Kidney, of course, who brought him into Leinster, actually. He was the one that approached him, then brought him into the Irish team.
Yeah.
First year, he was helpful in getting Gert Small and Les Kiss on board and so forth, and was a very strong presence as a team manager. And now, I'm not giving him all the credit for it, but he was there when they won the Grand Slam as well. And then he went into EPCR. He had his battles with the English and French club owners. And then after the move to... I remember talking to him, he was leaving. He said he was just bored with it, he was fed up with it. But, yeah, I'll miss him terribly. It was very shocking news, wasn't it? Great guy.
Yeah. When you talk about, I suppose, they're so influential with acquisition of big players, and his own career having been so successful in sport, and then afterwards I think even commercially,
yeah.
so smart. But in terms of managing the little fella, figuratively speaking and psychologically, like I was on the outskirts of a Leinster team in 06-07. I was a backup to Felipe, and Cheika was never the kindest to fringe players, and I'm not alone on that, and that was just his approach. But he took an amazing amount of time with myself and about 10 others who were really kind of outcasts in that squad. So he not only had the capacity to manage the likes of Cheika and the IRFU and acquisition of players, but he paid attention to the little guy on the fringes, and I think that speaks volumes for him as a person. And I cherish those memories of how well he treated myself and a number of others. When nobody ever saw that or heard about it, they'll see the stories about playing in Croker and Lansdowne, but incredible man.
Much of what he did was behind the scenes.
Absolutely, yeah. Incredible fella.
Incredible.
Very sad loss. Yeah.
Okay, well, that is a lovely tribute. Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times, Andy Dunne. Thanks, fellas. That was superb.
Cheers, thank you.